March 15, 1944. Luftwaffe High Command, Berlin. A classified intelligence bulletin crosses the desk of every fighter group commander from Holland to Bavaria. The document, stamped Urgent Tactical Directive, consists of 3 pages analyzing American P-47 Thunderbolt operations. The final paragraph contains a sentence that will be whispered in pilot briefing rooms, debated in officers' clubs, and ultimately ignored by young men convinced of their own invincibility. Avoid prolonged engagement with P-47 formations. Disengage when altitude advantage is lost. To veterans of the Battle of Britain, pilots who destroyed Spitfires over Dover and Hurricanes over London, the directive reads like capitulation dressed as tactics. Major Joseph Pips Priller, Knight's Cross recipient with 96 confirmed kills, throws the document across his office. "They want us to run," he says to no one, "from Americans. But the intelligence officers who authored the directive understand something the aces refuse to accept. The mathematics of attrition have shifted. The Luftwaffe is bleeding to death in a war it can no longer win through individual heroism. The Thunderbolt, that massive, graceless American machine, has become the instrument of that attrition, not through elegance, but through relentless industrial inevitability. The directive is not advice. It is prophecy, and prophecy, in war, is written in blood before it's written in ink. To understand the directive requires understanding what preceded it. The 18 months of brutal aerial combat that transformed American fighter tactics from theoretical doctrine to combat-proven methodology. In early 1943, when P-47 Thunderbolts first arrived in England, Luftwaffe intelligence officers assessed them with professional confidence. The analysis was thorough: weight, wingspan, engine specifications, armament, performance curves. The conclusion seemed obvious. The P-47 was a high-altitude interceptor forced into escort duty, flying missions for which it was fundamentally unsuited. The assessment was accurate and completely wrong. Accurate in technical details, wrong in strategic implications. German intelligence correctly identified the P-47's limitations: poor climb rate compared to FW-190s, inferior turning performance against Bf-109s, excessive weight that seemed to contradict every principle of fighter design. What they failed to predict was how Americans would adapt tactics to transform limitations into advantages. The Luftwaffe in 1943 dominated European skies through accumulated experience. Their pilots averaged 500 combat hours. They flew from familiar airfields with excellent logistics, superior maintenance, and tactical flexibility born from 3 years of continuous operations. When they engaged American bomber formations, they did so with coordinated attacks. Large formations striking from multiple angles, overwhelming escort fighters through numerical superiority and tactical sophistication. The early P-47 groups suffered accordingly. Pilots fresh from American training schools with perhaps 200 flight hours and 0 combat experience faced German aces who had survived Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. The learning curve was vertical and deadly. In the first 3 months of operations, P-47 groups achieved barely favorable kill ratios, roughly 1-to-1, sometimes worse. Luftwaffe pilots reported the Thunderbolts as heavy and predictable, dangerous if allowed to attack from advantageous positions, but easily defeated in turning combat. German tactical doctrine remained unchanged: separate the escorts from the bombers, force them into individual dogfights, exploit superior turning performance and pilot experience. It worked. B-17 and B-24 formations suffered catastrophic losses on deep penetration raids. The Americans kept coming: more bombers, more fighters, more missions, but the exchange rate favored Germany. Then, gradually, imperceptibly at first, something shifted. American pilots stopped accepting German terms of engagement. They stopped turning, they stopped pursuing. They started fighting a different kind of war, one the Luftwaffe had never encountered. By late 1943, kill ratios began tilting American. By early 1944, the tilt became an avalanche, and German intelligence officers started writing directives about disengagement. The transformation began not with grand strategy, but with individual pilots learning to survive. Second Lieutenant Robert Johnson, 56th Fighter Group, discovered the principle during a mission over Holland in June 1943. Attacked by 4 FW-190s while separated from his formation, Johnson faced the choice every fighter pilot dreads: turn and fight outnumbered, or run and face accusations of cowardice. He pushed the stick forward. The P-47 responded instantly, nose dropping, airspeed increasing, altitude bleeding away in exchange for velocity. The pursuing FW-190s followed, expecting the American to level out and re-engage. Johnson kept diving, 400 miles per hour, 420, 450. The German fighters, lighter and more agile in turning combat, reached their structural limits. Flutter appeared in their control surfaces, dangerous oscillations that presaged catastrophic failure. The Germans broke off. Johnson leveled at 5,000 feet, alone but alive, and pointed his Thunderbolt toward England. He landed with battle damage, 17 bullet holes, but landed. The mission report included a single tactical notation: P-47 dive performance exceeds enemy capability. That notation, multiplied across dozens of pilots and hundreds of engagements, became doctrine. Colonel Hubert Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group, formalized what his pilots discovered through survival. Never turn with the enemy, never climb with the enemy, never fight on their terms. Instead, altitude for life, speed for survival. One devastating pass and extend away if the target survives. German pilots initially interpreted this as cowardice. Their training emphasized close combat, the pilots' duel, victory through superior skill in traditional dogfighting geometry. When Americans refused engagement after a single pass, Luftwaffe aces felt insulted. They reported the Thunderbolts as timid and lacking aggression, but timidity that kills you is not cowardice, it's mathematics. The Americans understood what the Germans refused to accept. This wasn't a tournament where individual glory mattered. It was industrial warfare where the only victory that counted was mission success. If the bombers reached their targets, the mission succeeded. If the P-47 pilot survived to fly tomorrow, he contributed to cumulative attrition. Pride was expensive. Survival was profitable. By autumn 1943, the pattern was unmistakable. American fighter pilots were developing longer combat lifespans. They completed tours, returned home, and were replaced by pilots they'd trained. Meanwhile, German aces kept dying. Spectacular victories followed by statistical inevitability. The Luftwaffe was bleeding experience it could not replace. And Luftwaffe intelligence officers began documenting why. January 1944. Luftwaffe Tactical Analysis Section, Tempelhof, Berlin. Hauptmann Werner Schröer, intelligence officer and former fighter pilot, compiles reports from across the Western Front. His assignment? Determine why Thunderbolt kill ratios have improved from marginal to devastating in 6 months. The data arrives in stacks: combat reports, interrogations of captured American pilots, technical assessments from damaged P-47s recovered in occupied territory, observations from surviving German pilots. The pattern emerges with uncomfortable clarity. American pilots have stopped fighting like Europeans. Traditional fighter tactics, developed over decades and refined through 2 world wars, assume both adversaries accept similar rules: engage, maneuver, achieve positional advantage, press attack, victory or death. The Americans have discarded these assumptions entirely. Schröer identifies the core tactical shift. Thunderbolt formations maintain altitude discipline with fanatical consistency. They patrol at 30,000 feet or higher, above German fighters' optimal cruising altitude. Above the bombers they protect. They wait. When Luftwaffe formations commit to attacking bomber streams, the P-47s roll into diving attacks from above and behind. The geometry is devastating. American fighters accelerating through 500 miles per hour, 850 caliber guns converging, 2-second firing window. German fighters focused on bomber attacks detect the threat only when tracers arrive. Defensive maneuvers are predictable. Hard turn, maximum G-force, attempt to reverse the engagement. But the Thunderbolts don't follow into the turn. They continue diving, extending away, using accumulated speed to zoom climb back above German operating altitude. Within 90 seconds, they've reset to advantageous position. The tactical cycle repeats until either the Germans disengage completely or enough P-47s accumulate altitude advantage to dominate the engagement space. Individual German pilots, even aces, cannot counter systematic altitude and energy management executed by entire formations. Schröer's report includes specific statistics. Average engagement time between P-47s and German fighters has decreased from 8 minutes in early 1943 to 90 seconds in late 1943. American pilots fire shorter bursts, achieve higher hit percentages, and survive defensive maneuvers more consistently. The P-47's dive speed, repeatedly measured at 510 miles per hour, exceeds every operational German fighter's structural limits. The conclusion is professionally phrased but strategically stark. The P-47 should be considered a high-energy attack platform rather than a traditional fighter. Engagement should be avoided unless overwhelming tactical advantage exists. Priority should be given to bomber interception over fighter combat. Schroer submits the report knowing it will be resisted. Aces don't retreat. Knights don't run. But knights, he reflects grimly, belong to an age that ended when industrial warfare began. The resistance to Schroer's recommendations comes immediately and predictably. Fighter group commanders, men who earned Knight's crosses through aggressive combat, reject the notion of avoiding engagement. Major Heinz Baer, 50 kills and counting, articulates the objection during a heated briefing at Luftwaffe High Command. We're fighters, not postal clerks. If we won't engage the Americans, who will protect the Reich? The question contains its own answer, which no one wants to acknowledge. Perhaps the Reich cannot be protected, not by individual heroism, not by tactical brilliance, not by any amount of courage against the industrial output that produces more P-47s each month than Germany manufactures across all fighter types. But doctrine changes slowly, even under catastrophic pressure. Throughout early 1944, Luftwaffe fighter units continue engaging P-47 formations using traditional tactics, climbing to intercept, attempting to separate escorts from bombers, forcing individual dogfights. Some succeed through superior positioning or numerical advantage. Many more fail, losing pilots and aircraft to the American dive and extend methodology. The mathematics become undeniable. In January 1944, the 8th Air Force loses 3.5 bombers per 100 sorties on missions with P-47 escort. On missions beyond Thunderbolt range, losses jump to 9.8 per 100. The difference? Those 3 bombers per 100 sorties, represents the protective value of fighters the Germans are told to avoid engaging. Simultaneously, American production accelerates. Republic Aviation's Farmingdale factory, Curtiss-Wright's Buffalo plant, and Evansville's manufacturing complex collectively produce more than 800 P-47s monthly by early 1944. The Luftwaffe's entire monthly fighter production, across all types, averages 900 aircraft. But German production includes bombers, night fighters, reconnaissance aircraft, and trainers. America's 800 Thunderbolts represent pure, concentrated air superiority capability. The strategic implication is merciless. Even if German pilots achieve favorable kill ratios, America replaces losses faster than Germany can inflict them. A Luftwaffe pilot who shoots down 2 P-47s before dying has achieved tactical success and strategic failure. The Americans return next mission with 3 fresh Thunderbolts and 2 trained pilots. The Germans field 1 replacement pilot, inadequately trained, low on flight hours, unfamiliar with the front, who will statistically die within 15 missions. Major Günther Rahl, 275 kills and the 3rd highest scoring ace in the Luftwaffe, speaks quietly during a commander's conference. We're killing Americans faster than they can learn, but they're learning faster than we can kill them. And they have more students. The room falls silent, because everyone knows he's right. March 1944. The intelligence directive goes into circulation with explicit instructions. All fighter group commanders must brief their pilots on revised tactical doctrine regarding P-47 engagement. The core guidance is stark. Avoid unless positional advantage is overwhelming. Disengage when altitude parity is lost. Prioritize bomber attacks over fighter combat. The directive reaches JG-2, Richthofen, stationed at Creil, France. Major Kurt Bühligen, commander and veteran of 600 combat missions, gathers his pilots in the briefing room. He holds the directive without reading it. His men, 40 pilots ranging from veterans with 50 kills to replacements with 0, wait in silence. High Command, Bühligen begins, believes we should avoid engaging Thunderbolts. The reaction is immediate, incredulous laughter, angry muttering. Someone says cowards loudly enough to be heard. Bühligen lets them vent, then raises his hand for silence. I fought in Poland, France, Britain and Russia, he says quietly. I've engaged every fighter the Allies produce. The Thunderbolt is different. He pauses. Not because it's superior in traditional metrics, it turns poorly, climbs slowly, handles like a truck, but because American pilots have learned to exploit strengths we didn't know mattered. He describes the tactical pattern: altitude discipline, dive attacks, refusal to turn, energy management that transforms weight into weapon. They've made limitations irrelevant by refusing to fight where those limitations matter. We keep trying to force turning combat, they keep refusing, and they're killing us. The younger pilots remain skeptical. They've trained for dogfighting, the romantic, skilled combat of aces and kills and glory. The idea of avoiding engagement contradicts everything they believe about fighter operations. One asks, if we don't engage fighters, how do we protect the bombers they escort? Booligan has no good answer. The logic is circular. Avoid fighters to survive, but fighters exist to prevent bomber attacks. The directive offers tactics without strategy, survival techniques without victory conditions. It's an admission, carefully unspoken, that the Luftwaffe cannot achieve air superiority over Germany while preserving its fighter force. That night, pilots drink and argue. The veterans understand survival's value. They've seen enough friends die to appreciate caution. The newcomers see only dishonor in retreat. The cultural divide mirrors the strategic paradox. German military tradition emphasizes aggression, decisive battle, victory through superior will. American methodology emphasizes sustainability, favorable exchange rates, victory through accumulated advantage. The two philosophies are incompatible. Only one can survive industrial warfare's arithmetic, and by March 1944, the arithmetic favors American mass over German skill. April 11, 1944. Mission to Oschersleben. The reality that intelligence officers documented in classified reports manifests in combat over central Germany. 50 B-17 Flying Fortresses, 91st Bomb Group, approach their target, aircraft manufacturing facilities. Above them, weaving in protective patterns, 16 P-47 Thunderbolts from the 56th Fighter Group Patrol at 32,000 feet. Below, assembling over their airfield at Salzwedel, 30 FW-190s from JG-1 climb to intercept. They reach 28,000 feet, optimal altitude for their aircraft, and turn toward the bomber stream. The German formation leader, Hauptmann Klaus Mitusch, spots the Thunderbolts 4,000 feet above. Standard doctrine would call for climbing to engage the escorts, separating them from the bombers. Mitusch remembers the directive: avoid engagement. He makes the decision: ignore the escorts, attack the bombers from head-on, break away before the P-47s can respond. His formation accelerates, diving slightly to build speed, approaching the bombers at a combined closure rate exceeding 600 miles per hour. The Thunderbolts respond exactly as intelligence predicted they would. They roll inverted, pull into diving attacks, accelerate through 500 miles per hour. The geometry is predictable but unavoidable. The FW-190s commit to their head-on bomber pass, 2 seconds of firing opportunity, cannon shells tearing into B-17 fuselages, then break downward to escape. The P-47s arrive during the break. 8 fighters, each carrying 8 guns, each gun firing 13 rounds per second. The math is apocalyptic. 832 rounds per second, total, converging in space. The FW-190s must transit. 3 German fighters disintegrate immediately. Direct hits on engines, cockpits exploding, wings separating. 5 more sustain damage, leaking fuel, trailing smoke, controls compromised. Mitusch's formation breaks apart, individual pilots seeking survival through instinct rather than coordination. The P-47s don't pursue into individual dogfights. They maintain formation integrity, extend away from the scattered Germans, convert speed to altitude in coordinated zoom climbs. 90 seconds after initial engagement, they're back at 30,000 feet, reformed, repositioned to defend the bombers. The Germans, scattered between 15 and 20,000 feet, bleeding speed and cohesion, cannot reassemble for another attack before the bombers complete their run and turn for England. The mission succeeds. 3 FW-190s destroyed, 5 damaged, 0 bombers lost to fighter attack. 1 P-47 returns with minor damage from a deflection shot. The exchange rate, 3-0, with the Americans achieving their mission objective. The math that intelligence officers warned about, demonstrated with ballistic finality. That evening, surviving German pilots file reports that repeat the same phrases. Could not evade. Too fast. No opportunity to counter. May 1944. The strategic situation deteriorates beyond tactical solutions. Allied invasion preparations intensify across southern England. Massive accumulations of men, equipment, and aircraft that even German intelligence's compromised networks can detect. The Luftwaffe faces impossible mathematics. Defend against daylight bombing raids that destroy German industry. Defend against anticipated invasion that will establish Allied air bases in France. Defend German airspace with pilot losses exceeding replacement rates by 3 to 1. Luftwaffe High Command issues refined directives. The guidance regarding Thunderbolts becomes more explicit. P-47 formations represent high-risk, low-value targets. Engagement should occur only when bomber destruction requires accepting escort combat. Priority: survive to engage bombers multiple times over attempting to destroy escorts once. The phrasing is careful. It never says don't engage explicitly, which would constitute an admission of inferiority that propaganda cannot tolerate. But the meaning is clear to every pilot who reads it. Avoid the Thunderbolts unless absolutely necessary. The cultural impact is corrosive. Luftwaffe fighter pilots built their identity on aggressive combat, individual skill, the honor of the decisive engagement. Being told to avoid combat with a specific aircraft type, especially an American aircraft, built by a nation Germans were taught to view as industrially capable but martially inferior, contradicts everything they believe about themselves. Some pilots ignore the directives entirely. Oberleutnant Franz Stiegler, veteran of over 400 missions, articulates the resistance. I am a fighter pilot. My duty is to fight. If High Command wants us to run from Americans, they should issue us transport aircraft instead of fighters. Others, particularly younger pilots with less invested in traditional honor codes, follow the guidance pragmatically. They attack bombers, avoid extended P-47 combat, survive longer as a result. The kill-to-loss ratios tell the story. Pilots who engage Thunderbolts aggressively average 15 missions before death or serious injury. Pilots who avoid escort combat and focus on bomber interception average 27 missions. The 12-mission difference represents 12 days of combat, 12 opportunities to disrupt Allied strategic bombing, 12 chances to defend German cities and industries. From a strategic perspective, survival is success. From a cultural perspective, survival feels like failure. The psychological strain manifests in increasing rates of combat fatigue, disciplinary issues, and requests for transfer to less demanding roles. The Luftwaffe is not just losing pilots to combat, it's losing morale to mathematics. The most elite air force in European history is learning that industrial warfare doesn't care about traditions, honor, or individual heroism. It only cares about production rates, replacement costs, and cumulative attrition over time. June 6, 1944, D-Day. The invasion of Normandy transforms the strategic landscape and validates every mathematical projection that led to the Thunderbolt directive. The Luftwaffe manages fewer than 300 sorties over the invasion beaches, against more than 14,000 Allied sorties. The ratio is not 50 to 1. It's impossible to inevitable. P-47 groups, now numbering 18 in the European theater, fly low-level ground attack missions that would have been suicidal 6 months earlier. They strafe German positions, destroy transport columns, suppress anti-aircraft positions. The missions are brutal, flying through intense flak at 500 feet, aircraft returning with hundreds of holes, pilots learning new respect for the R-2800 engine that keeps running despite catastrophic damage. German fighter pilots attempting to interfere face impossible odds. Attacking Allied fighters at low altitude means abandoning energy advantage, the only tactical benefit the directive preserved. Luftwaffe pilots who dive on P-47s conducting ground attack find themselves immediately engaged by other Thunderbolts providing top cover. The Americans operate in layers. Strike aircraft low, escort fighters medium altitude, sweep fighters high. The system is redundant, overlapping, and devastatingly effective. Hauptmann Josef Sepp Wurmheller, 93 kills, leads his Staffel against Allied fighters near Caen on June 30th. They engage a formation of P-47s attacking German armor. The Thunderbolts do not flee. They jettison their ordnance, turn into the attack, and the engagement devolves into exactly the kind of furball the directive warned against. Wormheller's skill, his experience, his Knight's Cross, none of it matters against 8 guns firing 300 rounds per second. His Bf-109 takes hits in the engine, cockpit, and wing root. He attempts emergency landing behind German lines but crashes short of the field. Death in combat. Age 24, 93 victories recorded. One more ace removed from a force that cannot replace him. The statistics by late June 1944 are catastrophic from the Luftwaffe perspective. 47 fighter pilots killed, 89 aircraft destroyed, mission effectiveness near zero against Allied operations. The P-47 groups report 18 losses, many to ground fire rather than aerial combat, with 63 confirmed aerial victories. The exchange rate, 3.5 to 1, even with Germans following directives to avoid engagement. Against pilots who ignored the guidance and engaged aggressively, the ratio approaches 6 to 1. The intelligence officers who authored the March directive watched the numbers with grim satisfaction. They were right. Being right in this case means documenting national defeat in precise statistical terms. July 1944. The directive evolves from tactical guidance to desperate mandate. New phrasing. Engagement with P-47 formations is prohibited except when bomber destruction is immediately achievable. Pilots violating this directive without demonstrable tactical necessity will face disciplinary review. The language shift from avoid to prohibited marks strategic capitulation. The Luftwaffe, which once ruled European skies from Norway to North Africa, now officially forbids its fighters from engaging a specific enemy aircraft. The prohibition is classified, not announced publicly, but every pilot knows. The knowledge is demoralizing beyond any propaganda's ability to counter. Major Heinz Baer, one of the Luftwaffe's most aggressive aces, complies with the directive for exactly 3 missions before reverting to instinct. On July 18th, escorting bombers near Paris, his formation encounters 16 P-47s at altitude advantage. The Americans dive into their characteristic attack. Baer's orders are explicit. Disengage, preserve the force, avoid combat. He attacks anyway. Not from recklessness but from calculation. The Thunderbolts are slightly out of position. The angle is favorable. If he strikes immediately, he might achieve surprise. His FW-190 closes at combined speed exceeding 600 knots, fires a 3-second burst, and claims hits on the lead P-47. Then the mathematics of the directive manifests. The remaining 15 Thunderbolts focus on Baer's element, 4 FW-190s against 15 P-47s, and the weight of fire is biblical. 120 50 caliber guns, 1,600 rounds per second, filling cubic miles of airspace with ballistic death. Baer's wingman dies instantly, aircraft torn apart. Baer himself takes hits in the wings and fuselage, engine sputtering, controls sluggish. He dives away, the exact maneuver Americans use. But his damaged aircraft cannot match the P-47's dive performance. He pushes past structural limits, pull out at 2,000 feet, crash lands in a French field, survives with injuries. 2 aircraft lost, 0 Americans destroyed. The disciplinary review is surprisingly gentle. Baer's record, 220 kills, provides immunity. But the message is clear. Even aces, even heroes, cannot overcome the tactical reality that created the directive. The Americans have more aircraft, better logistics, superior training pipelines, and tactical doctrine that exploits their advantages while minimizing their vulnerabilities. German pilots can be brave, they can be skilled, they can be heroic. None of it changes the mathematics of industrial attrition. The directive exists because courage without sustainability is suicide, and Germany, by mid-1944, cannot afford suicidal courage. Not when the alternative is delaying inevitable defeat long enough for some hope of negotiated settlement. August 1944. American pilots, unaware of the specific German directives, notice changed enemy behavior. Captain Francis Gabreski, 28 kills, leads a mission deep into Germany and observes that Luftwaffe fighters disengage earlier, pursue less aggressively, seem more interested in survival than victory. During debriefing, he reports, "They're fighting differently, more cautious, almost reluctant." Intelligence officers compile similar reports from across the theater. The pattern is unmistakable. German fighter pilots avoid extended combat with P-47 formations unless absolutely necessary. Some American pilots interpret this as cowardice. The more experienced recognize it as adaptation. The Germans have learned at catastrophic cost that trading kills with Americans is strategically suicidal, but adaptation cannot overcome mathematics. By August 1944, the 8th Air Force fields more than 1,000 heavy bombers and 500 fighters daily. The Luftwaffe, defending German airspace, can generate perhaps 300 fighters per mission, and many pilots are inadequately trained replacements with 50 flight hours or less. The ratio is 3-to-1 American advantage before tactical or technical factors are considered. The Thunderbolt groups transition increasingly to ground attack, the mission profile where the P-47's durability provides decisive advantage. They destroy German logistics, rail yards, bridges, fuel depots, transport columns. Each destroyed locomotive represents tons of supplies that never reach the front. Each destroyed fuel truck represents sorties the Luftwaffe cannot fly. The cumulative effect is more devastating than aerial combat. Industrial warfare targeting the infrastructure that enables all other warfare. German pilots attempting to interdict these ground attack missions face the tactical nightmare the directive warned against. P-47s at low altitude focused on ground targets are covered by P-47s at medium altitude, which are covered by P-47s at high altitude. Attacking requires accepting combat under disadvantageous conditions. Not attacking means watching as American fighters systematically dismantle German logistics. Major Gerhard Barkhorn, second highest scoring ace with 301 kills, summarizes the strategic trap during a commander's conference. We're told to avoid the Thunderbolts to preserve our strength, but if we avoid them, they destroy the infrastructure our strength depends upon. We can survive by not fighting, but survival without effect is just postponed death. The room offers no response, because there is no good answer. The directive represents choosing between immediate death in unfavorable combat and slow starvation of resources. Germany faces strategic checkmate, not through a single decisive defeat, but through accumulated attrition that makes eventual defeat inevitable. The Thunderbolt, that heavy and graceless machine, has become the instrument of that inevitability. September 1944. Allied forces liberate Paris and advance across France. Luftwaffe fighter units retreat to airfields in Germany, abandoning bases in occupied territory, losing the strategic depth that provided warning time and tactical flexibility. The P-47 groups follow, operating from newly captured French airfields, reducing their response time, increasing loiter duration over German territory. The directive gets updated again, now simply titled P-47 Tactical Summary, Mandatory Distribution. The content is stark. The P-47 Thunderbolt represents the primary American escort and attack fighter. It carries superior armament, exhibits exceptional dive performance, and demonstrates structural durability exceeding all German fighter types. Engagement should be considered high-risk tactical necessity rather than opportunistic target. Mission priority: bomber destruction, fighter combat, only when unavoidable. Luftwaffe pilots reading the directive in underground briefing rooms understand they're being told their primary mission is now survival rather than victory. Some accept this pragmatically. Dead pilots accomplish nothing. Others see it as betrayal of every principle they swore to defend. The split between survivors and believers mirrors the split between pilots who will see May 1945 and pilots who will die in the next 6 months. The technical assessments included with the directive provide detailed analysis. P-47D-25 variant carries maximum speed of 433 mph at 30,000 feet, ceiling of 43,000 feet, range with external tanks of 800 miles. Armament: 8 M2 Browning, 50 caliber machine guns with 425 rounds per gun. Armor: heavy plating protecting pilot. Critical systems: structure: radial engine with distributed cylinders, survives damage that would destroy inline engines. The conclusion is professionally phrased but strategically devastating. The P-47 should be engaged only from superior position with numerical advantage. Turning combat should be avoided absolutely. Prolonged engagement favors American energy management and structural durability. Reading between the professional language, the message is clear. You will probably die if you fight them. Therefore, fight them only when mission success requires accepting probable death. This is not cowardice. This is preservation of combat power for missions that matter. The younger pilots, replacement pilots, pilots with 10 missions instead of 100, read the directive and feel their confidence dissolve. They joined the Luftwaffe believing in German technical superiority, pilot skill, martial tradition. The directive tells them those beliefs are obsolete. The Americans won through neither elegance nor honor. They won by building 8,000 Thunderbolts and developing tactics that made those 8,000 Thunderbolts more effective than Germany's more elegant designs. Industrial warfare favors factories over heroes, and by September 1944, Germany's factories are burning. November 1944, the final major air battle over Germany. The 8th Air Force launches more than 1,200 bombers against oil production facilities, the refined petroleum that German armor, aircraft, and logistics depend upon. The target list includes Leuna, Merseburg, and Gelsenkirchen, facilities that together produce 40% of Germany's synthetic fuel. The Luftwaffe, despite fuel shortages, despite depleted pilot ranks, despite the directive warning against P-47 engagement, commits everything. Nearly 400 fighters, every operational aircraft from units across Germany. They have no choice. If these refineries are destroyed, the war ends within months from simple fuel starvation. The P-47 groups, nearly 200 Thunderbolts from 6 fighter groups, escort the bomber stream. They know this is the decisive engagement. Germans must commit, must fight regardless of directives, must accept unfavorable terms because strategic necessity overrides tactical caution. The battle unfolds across 300 miles of German airspace. Luftwaffe fighters attack in waves, desperate and coordinated, accepting losses to reach the bombers. The P-47s engage with systematic precision. High formations dive on German fighters setting up attacks. Medium formations protect bombers during the actual raid. Low formations intercept stragglers and damage German aircraft attempting to land. The statistics accumulate through 4 hours of continuous combat. 63 German fighters destroyed, 37 damaged beyond repair, 47 pilots killed. American losses: 21 P-47s, 12 pilots killed or captured. The exchange rate, 3-1. But the strategically decisive number is different. Bombers lost to fighter attack: 18. Out of 1,200, 1.5%. The refineries burn. The synthetic fuel production drops to levels that cannot sustain military operations. That evening, in a bunker beneath Berlin, Luftwaffe intelligence officers update their assessment. The P-47 directive, they note, was followed as much as tactical reality permitted. Pilots disengaged when possible, avoided prolonged combat, focused on bomber interception. The result was still catastrophic, because even optimal tactics cannot overcome 5-1 numerical disadvantage combined with aircraft that absorb damage, maintain formation integrity, and execute coordinated tactics with industrial precision. The final paragraph of the report, classified at the highest level, contains one sentence that summarizes 18 months of accumulated combat data. The P-47 Thunderbolt, through combination of technical capability and tactical employment, has achieved air superiority over Reich airspace despite individual German aircraft maintaining theoretical performance advantages. Translation: we were better. It didn't matter. They were enough, and enough multiplied by sustainable always defeats better multiplied by finite. The mathematics of industrial warfare, written in the directive months earlier, proven in blood over Merseburg. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe. The Luftwaffe ceases to exist as organized force. Surviving pilots, those who followed the directive and lived, surrender to Allied forces. Among them, intelligence officers who wrote the warnings, pilots who read them, commanders who enforced them. In post-war interrogations, Luftwaffe personnel speak with surprising candor. Major Heinz Baer, 220 kills and survivor against statistical probability, summarizes the P-47's impact. We underestimated American industrial capacity and overestimated the value of individual skill. The Thunderbolt was not the best fighter technically. Our FW-190D and BF-109K had better performance in many metrics, but it didn't need to be the best. It needed to be good enough, produced in overwhelming numbers and flown according to tactics that exploited its advantages. He pauses, choosing words carefully. The directive told us not to engage them. We should have listened earlier. But national pride, military tradition, and propaganda made listening impossible, until mathematics made it undeniable. American pilots, unaware for months that their adversaries operated under explicit orders to avoid engagement, react with mixed emotions upon learning of the directive. Some feel validation. Their tactics worked so well that enemy command officially designated them too dangerous to fight. Others feel the tragedy of the broader picture. Thousands died, proving what rational analysis could have concluded in 1943. The P-47 Thunderbolts combat record in Europe speaks with finality. 3,752 aerial victories, 9,000 locomotives destroyed, 86,000 railway cars wrecked, 6,000 armored vehicles eliminated. The statistical impact extends beyond numbers. The Thunderbolts' presence forced German tactical adaptation that reduced overall Luftwaffe effectiveness even when direct combat was avoided. The directive that warned "do not engage the Thunderbolts" represented German intelligence's accurate assessment of tactical reality. It was professional, rational, and strategically sound. But it was also an admission. The most elite air force in European history could not defeat American industrial warfare through traditional martial excellence. The lesson extends beyond aerial combat to the nature of modern warfare itself. Industrial capacity, sustainable logistics, and adequate but mass-produced equipment deployed with appropriate tactics will defeat superior individual systems supported by inadequate infrastructure. The P-47 wasn't meant to be beautiful or elegant. It was meant to be effective, durable, and producible at scale. The Germans wrote a directive acknowledging this reality. By the time they wrote it, the reality was already inevitable, and inevitability, in war, requires only time to manifest.